Julian McKenzie from The Athletic joined me on today's episode as we reflect on the impact that Johnny Gaudreau had with the Calgary Flames. I've already done an episode centered around his impact with the Columbus Blue Jackets alongside Brian Hedger, but I felt as though it was right for me to also discuss his impact with Calgary. There's a lot to break down alongside with Julian. It is a very sensitive topic, but it's something that needs to be had. Let's get this started.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here at the Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play announcer, Devils writer of Pucks Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. As we enter the new NHL season, it's been a tough few weeks for the hockey discourse, especially with the passing of Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau, what they meant to not only New Jersey, but just hockey in general. I had Brian Hedger, writer for the Columbus Dispatch, on this show not too long ago to talk about Johnny Gaudreau's impact for the Columbus Blue Jackets. And I figured it was only right to talk about his impact for the Calgary Flames as well. And joining me on today's show to reflect on the Gaudreau impact and their legacy is writer for The Athletic, Julian McKenzie. Julian, before we get into anything, how are you holding up, man?
I'm okay. I'll say that seeing this over the last few days has been really eye-opening and obviously sad. First off, thank you so much for having me. I should have said that first. It's an honor to be on your show. But yeah, just seeing how the city of Calgary has responded to Johnny Gaudreau's passing, and of course to his brother Matthew, unfortunately, as well. Really sad, really eye-opening for me in the sense that this is a city that was still obviously hurting from Johnny leaving as a free agent, but to see those feelings go from heartbreak in one sense for him leaving to heartbreak of him unfortunately dying way too soon, it's difficult to describe, and I apologize for not being as eloquent as I can be to discuss that, but there are so many people who are hurting from this, and there are so many people who remain in the Flames organization who got to see Johnny Gaudreau grow from this college hockey star to an NHL star in his 9 seasons in Calgary. So to see a lot of those guys like Frank Conroy at the vigil tell stories, Michael Backlund as well, that was really, it was just such a emotional time, and it will still be an emotional time for Flames fans and former teammates of Johnny's and everyone else in the hockey world, obviously. But to see that Calgary has responded the way that they have, I'm not surprised, but it is it's still very much overwhelming to see the support that has poured out from the city in the last few days.
Yeah, just like I said, Johnny Gaudreau, the Gaudreau family, they were really big in New Jersey. And I had one of my associates on this show, Joseph Stanislaw, and he basically said that Johnny Gaudreau can be seen as sort of like a big figure here in New Jersey when it comes to hockey, because despite him being small in stature, it didn't matter. He could compete with the best of them, and he was one of them. And it is definitely just heartbreaking to see, but I also like the sense of community of everyone coming together. I think if I have to look at it in a different perspective, and recently the Gaudreau brothers were laid to rest at St. Mary Magdalene Catholic Church in Pennsylvania. As a fellow Catholic myself, it definitely, that also hits hard a little as well. I asked Brian this question: where were you when the news broke? Because there was some controversy leading up to it, and I think we were all just on pins and needles waiting for that official assessment, which didn't come until the next morning?
I was home. I just was resting for the evening, and I had gotten a text from a fellow media member in Calgary about it. And it was just really eerie and shocking to hear. And obviously, this is the Thursday night before everything came to a head, and it was formally announced the next morning. I say eerie because earlier in the day, I had done radio for Sportsnet 960, co-hosting a show with Peter Klein, and we were talking about just we're just doing a whole segment on what the Flames should do for players of a certain era post 2004 Cup run, where maybe you don't have an obvious jersey number to be retired, but you still had some star players in Johnny Gaudreau, in Matthew Tkachuk, who maybe for the Flames franchise might still be worth honoring in some way. For those who are not familiar with the Flames franchise, they do have numbers retired in guys like Mika Kiprusoff and Mike Vernon and Joe McGinley and Lanny McDonald, but they also have numbers honored as forever a Flame, not specifically retired, but they're pretty much like one step below that retired status. In Al McInnes is number 2 and Joe Nieuwendyke's number 25. And I've always thought that those two numbers should be retired, and you should have some kind of ring of honor or ring of fire to celebrate players who may not be worth retiring their numbers, but still acknowledging and celebrating in some way. And I think Johnny Gaudreau would have fit that description, considering the production he had as a Flame in his tenure there. Just you could find him in the top 5 or top 10 for goals and points and even assists in the franchise. I'm not to double check goals, but I know for assists and points for sure. He's definitely put himself he's in the Flames record books. I think for Gaudreau, he just in the way that he played and the way that he inspired so many kids in his time as a Calgary Flame, there's a reason why you still see so many people walk around in Johnny Gaudreau jerseys. But as I mentioned earlier, with how people were still hurting after he left the franchise as a free agent to go to Columbus, that pain and that heartbreak was still there. And case in point, for the segment we did, we had a lot of people who texted in basically saying a lot of negative, I don't want to say hateful, but negative stuff. Just basically just still upset about how things went. And that emotion was still carrying over in the way people responded to the way we were doing that segment. So when I got that text from my friend later on that night that something went wrong, it was just really, I didn't know what to say. I was just hoping and praying it wasn't true. And I saw the social media stuff just like everybody else. And I really was just hoping it wasn't true. I really just was hoping that, maybe it was just an accident. Maybe he's in some other condition, and obviously for his brother too. But when it was announced the next morning that both brothers had passed, you just feel this sinking feeling in your stomach that this was. I mean, it's a avoidable tragedy, and there's nothing we could do to bring either of them back. It's just such a sad, horrific tragedy, and I can't help but I can't imagine what the Gaudreau family has been feeling these last few days. I can't imagine what they must have been feeling. Obviously, we know that they were supposed to celebrate a wedding, and that's why the Gaudreau brothers were around. And they have to think of that weekend when they were supposed to be happy as a time to remember two crucial pillars of their family taken away way too soon. And to see all the tributes pour in from around the sporting world, that really surprised me. It's one thing for the hockey world to come together and celebrate the life of Johnny Gaudreau, but seeing people like LeBron James and Mike Trout and all these different other sports teams, the Columbus Crew, the MLS team, the local team in the area, or or some of the baseball teams in Major League Baseball pay tribute. That was something. That was really special to see for the Gaudreau family. And I just hope that they're able to heal throughout this time. I mean, right now it's still very fresh, and I know everyone grieves differently, but they're going to obviously feel this for a while. It's one thing for us to be in the situation where we're days removed from what happened. October, November, December, as we start getting into the NHL season, and we get further and further away from the incident. That's when the family will need more. They'll need more help and support from everyone else around, because then it'll just be them. They'll have to do whatever they can to build themselves back up from this unfortunate tragedy. That's what I'm thinking of.
Before we continue with today's episode with Julian, let me tell you guys about Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. I've actually used Indeed before to book myself some play-by-play gigs, and I use it to this very day. Listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support my show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Okay, let's get back to today's episode with Julian McKenzie of The Athletic. Take it away once again. It's going to take some time, I think, for everyone. It's going to take time, and like you said, people grieve differently. And I think the best way we can remember Johnny Gaudreau is celebrate the good he's done for hockey. And I asked Brian Hedger about Johnny Gaudreau's impact with the Columbus Blue Jackets, because that was an organization that didn't really sign too many big name players. And here comes Johnny Gaudreau signing a deal to play with Columbus, giving the city some hope. And I want to highlight Calgary because he did spend most of his time with the Flames. And I know you joined The Athletic a little late. Like you said before the recording that you didn't get the chance to interact with Johnny Gaudreau, but you still know his impact. So can you sort of paint a picture of what Gaudreau's impact has meant to Calgary and the entire organization?
The best way I can describe it is he was this impactful, dynamic, superstar caliber player who ended up being this bridge joining Flames fans of an older era. And either they stuck with the team through thick and thin as they were going through the 2000s, as they were distancing themselves further away from that 04 run, and joining them with a generation of fans who either had taken a break or were just young kids who were slowly starting to watch more Flames games and were growing up with Johnny Gaudreau. Seeing him, knowing about his exploits in college hockey and seeing him get the name Johnny Hockey and the Hobie Baker Award and compete for a national championship, obviously, like, there was so much attached to him before he had even entered the league. But to see him deliver on it at the NHL level, he just made himself into something special for this organization. A team that in the 2000s, in the 2010s, we could be honest and frank about it, this franchise has been starving for star talent and players to put them over the top. And Johnny Gaudreau was one of those players who was able to do that. And I also think of Johnny Gaudreau as a blueprint for players of his size and stature. A short guy, but was very elusive on the ice, incredible skill with the puck, was able to create point production, goal production along the goal line, could use him in power play situations. He was an offensive piece for this team. And his best year, that 2022 campaign, over 110 points, he was a borderline MVP candidate. He was a borderline MVP candidate that year on a team that was doing. I mean, we know it ended unfortunately for them in the second round, but on a line with Elias Lindholm and Matthew Tkachuk, they were producing so well, all three of them together. He brought people out of their seats. And again, to go back to him leaving, there's a reason why people felt emotionally tied to him as they were, because they loved him. And to see him leave was a shock to their system. And I think a lot of fans felt sad at the fact that, as opposed to Matthew Tkachuk, who had a year left on his contract, said, "Hey, I want to move," Johnny Gaudreau took his time and decided to leave as a free agent. But I think it's maybe it's a little bit easier for us as media people to just think about a person's decisions regardless of team affiliation. But for fans, sometimes you're clouded a little bit by that fandom. But Johnny wanted to be closer to his family in the States. And I think that's a pretty admirable reason for anybody to want to be closer to home and to want to do something like that. But in terms of his impact in Calgary, this young, talented star player that Flames fans could look up to and say, "Hey, this guy is really great on the ice and he plays for our team." And also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Game 7 overtime winner in the first round of that 2022 playoffs, where he beats the Dallas Stars. He beats Jake Ottinger, who was an absolute force in that series. And there's a lot of people, again, especially those same ones who grew up alongside Johnny Gaudreau, that's going to stand as like their favorite Calgary Flames moment, especially in this franchise that hasn't seen the same amount of playoff success as a Colorado, for example, or Tampa Bay. That moment in 2022, people are going to go back to that moment, especially now, for a very, very long time.
We've seen it with the ceremonies and the heartfelt messages all throughout the stadiums, and it's just beautiful to see. And similar to what you said, like we always have certain feelings when a player makes a decision. I remember covering Johnny Gaudreau's free agency because there was a possibility that he could sign with the New Jersey Devils, albeit he didn't grow up a Devils fan and he grew up in South Jersey. And usually if you're from South Jersey, you're not that far away from Philadelphia. And so you lean towards the Flyers, but he would still be in his hometown state. And I was one of the people who I'll admit I was salty when he signed with Columbus, but that's just because I had no personal ill feelings towards him. I wanted a good hockey player on the team that I covered. And I think it goes to show you how impactful he was. And, just being here right now, it's just like, it's a weird feeling if you can understand what I mean. And it's just like, yeah, I thought very highly of Johnny Gaudreau, and I really wanted him to come to New Jersey, but ultimately he made the decision that was best for him and his family, his loved ones, his associates, and I can't fault him for that at all. And he left a big impact with Columbus, even though he was there for 2 seasons, and it's just very, like, I think the word that you described was just eerie. And I think it's eerie for a lot of people just to know, like, life is never guaranteed. Like, it's easier to destroy than it is to create. Like, if you know what I mean, like it takes like months of love and caring to grow a flower, but yet once that flower is grown, it's so easy to destroy. And it shows you how fragile life is. So for everyone out there, always check in on your loved ones, because you never know. That's my thing. Before we close out today's episode, let me tell you guys about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the price you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers. Okay, let's close out today's sensitive episode with Julian McKenzie. Take it away once again. I think my final question for you is, how do you want Johnny Gaudreau to be remembered? And do you want to see the NHL do something to honor his memory, maybe naming a trophy after him or a patch or something? Like just share. I'm just spewing ideas, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
I think we're definitely going to see some tributes for Johnny Gaudreau. I know that the Flames have. I mean, right now they're in the middle of celebrating his legacy over the next couple of days, through some ideas that they have planned. I don't know if that'll stretch to honoring his jersey or wearing a patch. I'm sure we'll hear something about that fairly soon. But I mean, we've seen Cole Caulfield in Montreal as an example, a guy who looked up to Johnny Gaudreau, switch his number from 22 to 13. And it wouldn't surprise me if teams like Columbus and the Flames decided to do some kind of tribute to honor him. One moment for Columbus here while we're at it. The fact that he chose them as a team in free agency, a massive deal for a franchise where that's not an obvious free agent destination for anybody. And I think in that moment where a lot of people, where you might have been salty about it, I was a little bit more just confused, just like, really? Like Columbus? Like you want to make this happen? Like I think a lot of people felt that way. But to see it,
I don't mean to interrupt you, but yeah, like you said, I was salty and confused because I'm like, I think it would be different if he went to the Flyers.
Yeah, if he went to the Flyers, it would have made a ton of sense. But
Flyers or Islanders or another East Coast team, I'm like, okay, fine. Lost that, but Columbus, they were a wild card. It was a wild card team, and I thought the Kraken for some reason were the wild card team, but ultimately it was Columbus.
Right, but a team like Columbus, who once upon a time they had guys like Artemi Panarin and Sergei Bobrovsky and Seth Jones and all these players, and some of those, and a lot of those guys ended up bolting and leaving. Matt Duchene's part of that list as well. That's a franchise that knows having talent and seeing it lead for whatever reason. Pierre-Luc Dubois can add up to that list as well. So for Johnny Gaudreau to pick that franchise, if I was a Blue Jackets fan, that would have meant the world to me. A star player saying, I want to play for this franchise for the next how many seasons. And unfortunately, Blue Jackets fans don't get to see that fully realized because of his untimely passing. And my colleague Aaron Fortsline raised a point. He's been covering this really well for us at The Athletic, but this is a franchise, unfortunately, that has known tragedy throughout chunks of its existence. A fan dying after taking a puck to the face after a slap shot from a Blue Jackets player. We're a couple off seasons distance from Matisse Kivlenieks, the goaltender who unfortunately passed away too soon as well. This unfortunately is just another heartbreaking moment for Blue Jackets fans who, this franchise, they don't have, again, we talk about the Flames not having that much success, at least in recent years. The Blue Jackets might be on a completely different level in terms of their history and what they've experienced. And for this unfortunate moment, this is, if I'm a Jacket, I mean, for all of us, we're devastated, but especially as a Blue Jackets fan, you're absolutely devastated at the fact that you don't get to have this player around your team anymore. Imagine a guy like Sean Monahan, who played with him in Calgary, basically best friends, and they were supposed to play together this season, and they're not going to have that. I would imagine that the Jackets will honor Johnny Gaudreau, at least at the very minimum, with some kind of patch. I think that's more. I don't want to. You know what? Everyone grieves differently. Everyone celebrates differently. I think just acknowledging the player that the NHL world had in whatever way teams feel they're comfortable with, that's good. That's obviously a start. I think at some point the Flames will have some kind of discussion about how to honor Johnny Gaudreau because of what he meant to that franchise, because he played with them for so long, because you can find his name in the Flames record book. I mentioned he's either top 5 or top 10 when you look at goals or points or assists as well. This is a player who meant so much to that franchise as long as he was there. I don't know if retiring his number is what the Flames will do, but I wouldn't be surprised if that doesn't have to be right away either. It could be somewhere down the line. Some kind of conversation is going to happen, but at least for this year, acknowledging his passing, patches are obviously going to be really cool, or weird to say cool, but I think those are solid gestures, solid ways, good ways to pay tribute to a star player in this league. And we'll see tributes from other teams as well. I just think that this death touched so many people around the league, touched so many players around the league. There's no way you don't see anything. I don't know if it gets to the point where he gets a trophy renamed. I don't know if it means a jersey being retired. But what is encouraging is that in death, we have seen people come together and celebrate his life. And I don't see that stopping anytime soon.
Absolutely. And talking to Brian Hedger, just Johnny Gaudreau, he didn't talk to the media often, but when he did, he was very respectful. And he always answered his answers with class. That's what Brian Hedger from the Columbus Dispatch informed me.
That's my sense of it too. Because the few times I've gotten to be with him in the scrum, whether I was in Columbus or whether he was in Calgary, obviously the ties between those two franchises with him, he was going to be someone who's going to have to talk about that. But he was somebody who still had a lot of love for the city of Calgary. This wasn't a guy who left and wanted to burn a bridge with the franchise. He was obviously still really close to a handful of players who were still on the Flames, guys like Rasmus Andersson and Michael Backlund, Andrew Mangiapane when he was on the team as well. Like there's so many remnants from his time there who are still hanging around the franchise, or they also just recently left the team as well. He still had ties to Calgary, and he would always, I think, as long as he was still able to play, he would always have that tie to Calgary, and his family. They had love for the city too, and his parents. They loved the city. They ended up being stars in the city. They ended up being recognized people. Fans love them. So even if he did leave, there's still, I think he obviously still had that soft spot for a city where he grew up in. I know I'm rambling a little bit now, but that's important to point out as well.
I think it's also important to say, don't get behind a wheel if you've been drinking. Get an Uber, because it can save lives. It's not worth it. I think, and on the other side of that, life isn't guaranteed to anyone, and live it to the fullest and make sure you keep your loved ones close as much as you can, because they could be gone in a flash. And the hockey community continues to hurt, but the way we reflect, the way we march forward is just remember the legacy of Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau, and may they rest in everlasting peace. Julian, I know this is the first time you've appeared on my show. I apologize for bringing you on for not so good circumstances. I do hope to have you on in a future episode again, but thank you for taking the time to talk about Johnny Gaudreau and his impact for Calgary and just his life in general. And our thoughts, heart, and prayers continue to be with his family, friends, loved ones, teammates, associates. Julian, where can my audience find you at?
X, you have it pretty well written on screen, but I guess for those listening on audio, JK McKenzie on social, and at The Athletic. If you subscribe, you'll find my work there.
Awesome. And
and the Chris Johnston Show, obviously. Yes.
So check Julian out on there, and continue to read his work on The Athletic. And like I do to close out every episode, continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day in New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys next episode. Special thanks to my guest star, Julian, for taking the time out of his day to talk about Johnny Gaudreau. Have a good one, everybody.